a final farewell to 9/11 hero Luis Alvarez at Immaculate Conception in Astoria. I'm Emily Druby, and that story is coming up.
9/11 first responder casualty numbers continue to rise. After risking everything on the pile at Ground Zero to save others, we'll talk with a priest who was there. New hope tonight for Christians in North Korea after President Trump met Kim Jong-un. Plus, tanks on the streets of Washington for Independence Day. And Bishop DiMarzio is here to talk about faith and the 4th of July. The news starts right now. "9/11 hero and fighter Luis Alvarez is remembered at a Catholic church in Queens this morning. Good evening, I'm Tamara Lane. Thousands of mourners lined the streets to honor the NYPD detective whose roots are found in the Brooklyn Diocese. The brave man's mass of Christian burial being celebrated at the Immaculate Conception Church in Astoria. Current News' Emily Druby reports on the solemn ceremony.
Among a sea of blue, friends and family bid a final farewell to Luis Alvarez. A true American hero. The former NYPD detective never backed down from an important fight. Fighting to find survivors in the wake of 9/11, Alvarez spent months digging through the rubble, fighting the cancer he developed because of the 3 months spent at Ground Zero, and in his final days, fighting for thousands who put their lives on the line to help after the tragic attacks, traveling all the way to Washington, asking for the September 11th Victims' Compensation Fund to be replenished just weeks before he died.
You all said you would never forget. Well, I'm here to make sure that you don't.
A fight that remained dear to him until the very end. During his funeral mass, his sister recalling one of her last interactions with Alvarez as he lay dying. He thought he was back on that pile.
The nurse asked him where he had been walking, and with David as my witness, my brother responded, "I was walking to find first responders, to make sure they get help."
Alvarez wasn't just a fighter, he was a man of faith. The son of a deacon in the Brooklyn Diocese, Alvarez was laid to rest at Immaculate Conception in Astoria, surrounded by family and friends, including John Fiel and John Stewart. He grew up in the parish and attended its school after his family came to the U.S., fleeing communist Cuba. Father John Harrington was the principal celebrant and the homilist. He knows the family well.
He saw himself as one with many others and never referred exclusively to himself as I.
Bishop Paul Sanchez of the Diocese of Brooklyn was in attendance.
Just a beautiful memory of a young man who chose a profession that required courage and fortitude, served in a distinguished manner, and continued a battle, fighting, as you know, cancer to the end, and has been a tremendous inspiration to everybody there. It was a beautiful event that brought us together and affirmed values that we all embrace: fortitude, selflessness, self-sacrifice.
Alvarez's fight may have ended here, but his legacy will live on. Just days after Alvarez's riveting testimony, both houses of Congress vowed renewed urgency to support the compensation fund. Tamara?
Emily, were you able to speak to any other 9/11 survivors while you were there?
I was able to speak with a whole bunch of them while I was there.
And what did they have to say about Detective Alvarez?
So a lot of the people I spoke with, either right now they're struggling with illnesses related to 9/11, or honestly they're just terrified that they're going to in the future. So many people called him a champion and a hero for his work that he did and for going down to Washington to fight for them on the last weeks of his life. It was incredibly emotional, and so many of the people I spoke with were just so grateful to him.
His life and legacy is an inspiration to us all. Thank you for your reporting. More sad news for 9/11 survivors. Deaths of other first responders who inhaled the toxic air at Ground Zero are expected to rise. The number could outpace the total killed on the day the towers fell. Currents News' Tim Harfman has that part of the story and talks with Father Brian Jordan himself, a first responder on 9/11.
The toxic cloud and deadly dust of September 11, 2001 is still impacting first responders today. More and more heroes are being laid to rest after years of suffering from post-9/11 illnesses. Father Brian Jordan, a Manhattan priest and first responder himself, says the worst is yet to come.
For the next 5 years, it's predicted, and I believe it's going to be an accurate prediction. For 5 years, more people have died from toxins due to exposure at 9/11 than those who died the actual day.
Since the 2001 attack, about 10,000 first responders and victims have been diagnosed with cancer, and at least 2,000 deaths are attributed to 9/11 related illnesses. The risk of some cancers among first responders is 30% higher than the general population. Father Jordan says he's presided at least 20 funerals so far.
It's very sad to see them sort of deteriorate, gradually throughout the years, and it's very painful.
Father Jordan spent 9 months in Lower Manhattan, consoling first responders and their families. He says to his knowledge, he hasn't been affected by the toxins.
To be honest, I'm a little bit surprised that I haven't.
Why?
Many others have, and I guess I was spared.
Others, like John Field, haven't been so lucky. He's one of many first responders who appeared before Congress, fighting to get funding for the 9/11 Compensation Fund.
These men and women, uniform and non-uniform, the children of Lower Manhattan, are sick and dying, and their families being left in financial ruins.
We're all the people of God, and we're all fragile, we're all vulnerable, and realize that we're human beings. We're not robots, we're not machines, and we have to have care and concern, showing charity and love to them. Will make all the difference in the world for those who are suffering at the present time.
Tim Harfman, Currents News.
There's a frantic search underway for a young girl believed to have gone missing in the Rio Grande River. U.S. border agents and Mexican police are trying to locate the 2-year-old child. A Haitian woman told authorities she lost her daughter while crossing the water. The search involves several boats and a dive team. There's a lot more news headed your way, as we are highlighting some recent stories reported during Religious Freedom Week. But first, how the Trump-Kim handshake at the DMZ could affect Christian persecution in communist North Korea. Then, from Religious Freedom Week, how the faith is disappearing from a very important place. A brave nun describes being on the front lines in the fight against Christian persecution. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. There is new hope tonight that the communist regime in North Korea could ease up on the persecution of Christians. Experts at Aid to the Church in Need are pointing at the Trump-Kim meeting as a possible breakthrough. Melissa Butts reports exclusively for Currents News that the number of faithful at risk is large.
President Trump's meeting with Kim Jong-un was the first time a sitting U.S. president stepped foot in North Korea. It gained international attention, even from the Pope. Pope Francis called the recent meeting between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un a good example of the culture of encounter.
Saluto I protagonisti con la preghiera che tale gesto significativo costituisca un passo ulteriore nel cammino della pace.
The meeting lowers international tension and raises the possibility of a progressive opening of North Korea to the world, meaning a possible end to religious persecution in the country. Aid to the Church in Need categorized this meeting as positive, but at the same time is cautious. They estimate between 100,000 and 400,000 Christians live in hiding in North Korea. North Korea, as you see behind me, is marked in black. It's one of the countries in the world that persecutes and denies religious freedom the most. The Holy See and North Korea do not have diplomatic relations. The last time a Vatican delegation traveled to the country was in 2002. Those who've escaped North Korea say places of worship controlled by the state only exist so visitors get a false positive impression of religious freedom. We had the chance to talk to some people there, and many imagine this meeting between Trump and Kim Jong-un is a makeup operation to cleanse North Korea's image. H of the Church in Need says that perhaps one day the Vatican could intervene in North Korea in the same way John Paul II did in Cuba when he asked the government leaders to open themselves up to the world. But steps are being taken between the Holy See and North Korea. For example, Kim Jong-un sent the South Korean president to the Vatican in October 2018 to personally invite Pope Francis to come to North Korea. It's a visit he could potentially make if he goes to Japan this November. At the Vatican, Melissa Butts, Currents News.
Now, some memorable stories from Religious Freedom Week at an especially threatening time for the faithful. A top Catholic leader in Iraq has a harrowing prediction for his homeland, where he says Christianity is on the verge of extinction. Currents News' Michelle Powers reports.
Bombing after bombing around the world. Just the most recent pattern of attacks against modern-day Christians, making 2019 the bloodiest year yet for believers.
Religious persecution knows no boundaries. It respects no faith. It attacks everyone. So unfortunately, we're seeing a rising tide of persecution around the world.
Officials around the world agree the persecution of Christians is nearing genocide. Knox Thames is a U.S. Special Advisor for Religious Minorities. He says religious freedom is one of the most violated liberties in the world, especially in Iraq. In the birthplace of Christianity, the faith is facing extinction. Since the U.S.-led invasion toppled Saddam Hussein's regime, the Christian community there has dwindled from 1.5 million to less than 120,000. Despite the fact that the Islamic State terror group has been defeated in the country, the Archbishop of Erbil, Bashar Warda, believes there is still a fear stopping Christians from coming home. Fear the Islamic State will return and attack again. He says, quote, one of the oldest churches, if not the oldest church in the world, is perilously close to extinction. Those of us who remain must be ready to face martyrdom. Pascal Warda, a Christian and former minister in the country, echoes his concerns. There are still members of the Islamic State in hiding.
The spirit that exists already is there. Any Muslim who will not see his neighbor like his brother, like citizens, like partnership in the same land and the same rights, he can do this in any time.
Archbishop Warda accuses the world's leaders of political correctness, saying many will not speak out for Christians in fear of being labeled Islamophobic.
Michelle also reports the Archbishop challenged a group of British leaders asking if they would ever carry signs that say, "We are all Christians." Sister Annie DiMarzio is a brave Catholic on the front lines fighting persecution. She's from Aleppo in Syria, where war has ripped the city apart and forced so many Christians to flee. In December, she told Currents News the people trapped in the war zone needed emergency relief.
When we think about, okay, the war starts finishing, but we need to work on two levels. The building of soul and heart, and that is the most difficult things, and rebuilding the houses. Okay, when you have the help, it's easy to rebuild, but to rebuild the heart, the wounded heart, it will take long time, because the many factories destroyed, more than 200 factories, so that left thousands of people without work. Many companies ask their employees to leave. They don't have enough to pay. So you find a good number of people without job, so without income. And those also who work, what they gain, it's very little to help them to live the whole month. So it's very important, at least this period of time, for aid help, because it must be goes with two parts, helping them to stand and live in their dignity, at the same time to help them to find job and start again. Many organizations, many churches are opening centers or occasion to help children to come and try to, go back to their childhood. They miss the toys, they miss to play, they miss their innocent childhood. Prayer is very important. Second, I pray for the leaders in the world that the Lord will lighten their minds and give them the wisdom, because the sanction which is imposed on Syria, it's the only who's suffering is the people who's suffering. So I ask that the leaders will take this in consideration and to remove this sanction on Syria. All of us receive a message from our provincial saying we are free if we want to live. We had meeting, I remember in that time, and our sisters from British said, Syria is my country, I can't leave it. I lived years here. And that's, it's make me feel touched by this deep way, All of us said, no, it's our country. And I think, yes, it's a very good decision because, it's a very painful experience. We lost, personally, I lost many good friends to me during the war. When you think that you make little people, little children smiling and happy, you say, I touch the goal.
What a brave soul, truly doing God's work. Sister Annie also asked that everyone pray for all those being scarred by the war, including the soldiers. Still to come on Currents News, why tanks are on the streets of the nation's capital. And Everyday Heroes, a must-watch documentary from the Knights of Columbus. Also, the tablet has a brand new page called Our Diocesan Family, where you can share your pictures of recent baptisms, Holy Communions, confirmations, marriage, all the joyous sacraments. For more details and to submit your photos, go to thetablet.org/ourdiocesanfamily. Your picture may be published in an upcoming issue of the newspaper. We'll be right back. A huge 4th of July celebration is set to take place in our nation's capital. Battle tanks and other armored vehicles parked on the National Mall this morning, part of an Independence Day extravaganza including fireworks and fighter jets. The show being orchestrated by the Commander-in-Chief himself. The only catch, the tanks will not be rolling. That could tear up the city's streets. Ahead of the 4th, Bishop DiMarzio is here talking about many of the reasons to be proud of America. He's with Ed Wilkinson. Ed?
Well, thank you. And here we are on the 4th of July weekend. Bishop, big 4th of July weekend, 4-day weekend coming up here. And, a lot of talk about patriotism and nationalism. And some people say, well, it's not good to be too nationalistic, And I wonder what's your thoughts on that. Can we be proud of our country and who we are as Americans?
Oh, I think so. I think we have to understand that. But at the same time, we recognize the goodness of other countries. We're not unique in the world. We have had a unique history in some ways of come to the aid of other nations, and First World War, Second World War, and all the other conflicts. Not that we're a warmonger country, but we are a country that has assisted others. There's some reticence today looking back and saying, well, we got to have America first. Well, what does that really mean? Is it America only? Is America, that when America's strong, we can help others? So many interpretations, but patriotism is important. Our country is something that we cherish, that we give our loyalty to, and when necessary, even our lives, to defend the freedom that we have.
Mm-hmm. It's such a hot button issue, you know, and it's certainly become a political issue these days. Even so much as to think that a group like the Knights of Columbus, which, you know, they have a nice slogan for God and country, and some people think they're so radical they shouldn't even be considered for public office anymore.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
pretty.
what do you think of the Knights of Columbus and their for God and country? It's
well, it's a patriotic organization, really. It's a organization that is founded on religious principles, but is very patriotic. Fourth degree of Knights of Columbus, their whole focus is citizenship and participation in the civil society. So I mean, it's a good organization. I mean, when they're viewed as to the right, this is because so many people are so far to the left. Anything looks like it's right. Mm-hmm. So it's a very difficult culture we live in, where the only way is their way and not anybody else's way.
Mm-hmm. Some people like to have a one world mentality. They say we all belong to one world, and we should look more to international policing and international government. And how do we maintain our sense of who we are as Americans? And is it good to have that, you know, in face of all this one world mentality that's out there, Bishop?
Well, one world mentality is maybe a little extreme, but I do think something like the United Nations, if it works properly, can be a force that unites nations together for the better, for the good. Unfortunately, it's been politicized, so you have the left and the right fighting over so many different things that not much gets accomplished. Recently, one good thing happened. There's a agreement on migration, which I think is very well done when all is said and done. And if we could follow it, we would see some of the problems of migration in the world alleviated. But again, you need everybody to buy into it. The United States was not participating in that agreement. So it is a shame that we don't try to work together with others when we have some common interest and when we can collaborate. We need to do that more.
Yeah, and of course, we're known as a nation of immigrants, and here in this diocese, we call ourselves the Diocese of Immigrants because so many people have started from other nationalities. But can there be limits on migration? You're an expert. You're an international expert on this.
Of course, there's limits on migration. I mean, it's not there's something that cannot be limited. It can be limited depending on the ability of the country to absorb people. Well, at the same time, there are other ways that we can facilitate people staying where they belong in their own home country. Most people would, if they had a possibility, say, I'd rather stay home. I'd like to have an economy that supports me. So we need to change the world. In a globalized society that we have today, this is even more possible than it was in the past. We can share the wealth of the world together and make sure that everybody is picked up and raised up. So that's where we need to go.
Okay, Bishop, have a happy 4th of July. Have a good weekend. And now back to our news desk.
Thank you, Ed and Bishop DiMarzio. Happy 4th of July to you both. Finally, tonight, there is going to be a very special program in the Kearns News time slot tomorrow, the 4th of July. Net TV will televise an acclaimed documentary produced by the Knights of Columbus, and it's all about heroes.
We all have those opportunities, and you never want to look back and say, I didn't give it all I had.
Everyday Heroes is a documentary with the central message that heroism is a worthy goal that is within our grasp. The special follows the lives of 14 men who embody the mission of the Knights and demonstrate that making the world a better place begins with the individual human heart. You won't want to miss it. Everyday Heroes will air on Net TV on the 4th of July at 7 and Encores on July 6th at 4:30. That is Currents News. I'm Tamara Lane. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. And remember, Net TV is providing special programming tomorrow and Friday. We'll be back on Monday. Have a happy and safe 4th of July.